Hi guys, today I'm going to show you guys how to turn a relatively boring looking timber fence and retaining wall area like this into something that looks much more like this. Bam! How's that for a bit of camera magic? So as you can see, quite a transformation here in the appearance of the fence and this retaining wall area here. A really nice two-tone appearance. Now it's really easy to do, even if you haven't done any of this kind of woodwork staining in the past. Stick with me in the video here and I'll show you exactly what to use and how to do it. Let's get into it. Okay, the key to getting the really fantastic look here is to actually use two slightly different colors in your staining job here. So I'm going to do all of our perimeter type timbers here in a very dark stain, and then we're going to do a lighter stain in these areas here and on these fence pales up the top. Now I'm using water-based stain here. You can use oil-based, but I prefer to use water-based for all my fencing and only oil-based for decking. Now what I've done here is I've actually got a mid-color which is called a black bean, and I'm actually mixing these colors up to really suit exactly the tone that I want. So I'm using this mid-color black bean and I'm adding some charcoal in it, which is nearly black, just to really darken it up for these areas here. So we're going to put that dark color on first, and we're going to use pieces of cardboard just to almost tape off the areas here that we don't stain in these areas here. And once we've done that, we'll then do the stain inserts with a lighter color. I'll take my black bean and I'll stain it with a lighter version to get that tone as well. So let's jump into it and we'll do that staining of some of our frame areas here and see how that starts to look. Okay, now an important point here in regards to ongoing maintenance. When you do it like this with a two-tone, you want to do your dark colors first. So stain on your dark colors, 2 coats first, before you do your light colors. The reason you don't want to do light color and then try and highlight your dark colors on top, because that dark pigment is not going to absorb into the timber as well. So it'll initially look good, but after a couple of years that dark color will come off easier. Because what you want to do after 2 or 3 years with a maintenance coat, you won't have to redo dark and light. You can simply use a light stain to restain the entire area, even though you've got 2 tones. So just a little tip to think about there. Okay, so we're ready to do the darker colour stain on the highlight areas here. Now it's a bit impractical to go and put masking tape on all this area here throughout your whole fencing around the area around the house. So what we're going to do is we're just going to use a panel. You can use pieces of cardboard, but I'm going to use an aluminium clad panel here because it's relatively thin, and we're just going to hold it up against the edging there while we brush on our dark stain on this area here. Now the trick is you don't want to have too much stain on your brush when you're painting right into the edge here, because you can get bleeding across and behind. So normally with stain you do put quite a lot on your brush, but just when you're doing it close and on the edge here, try not to have too much on your brush when you do it along these edges here. So I'll jump into that now and show you how it's done. And just another little tip, by the way, when you're doing a mixed color like I'm doing here, write down on the top of the cans what you've actually used in your mix. In this case I've got 1 of rustic oak to 2 parts of black bean, so that if I pick up the can later on in a year's time, I know exactly what that mix is and what I've used on the fence. What I also do is I write this formula down inside a cupboard wall inside the house for all of the paints inside and outside in this house. So in 4 years time I'm trying to remember what I did. I've actually got it written on the wall inside so I can make that formula again. So let's jump into it. Now one important tip here when you're using, well, any paints, but especially a stain here where we've done a mix of 2 different colours, as you're doing your staining job, just regularly do a bit of a stir in the tin. Keep a stirring stick in the tin and keep stirring it, because if you don't, what you'll find is one of the colours can potentially float to the bottom or the top, and you might find you've started at one end of the fence really dark and the other end ends up quite light because it's just changed in the top of the tin. So just stir regularly as you go. Okay, you can see here that we've done all of our dark border edgings here in the dark stain color that we want. So and we've let that dry, of course, so before you get on and do the light colour, just make sure that this is dried first, of course, because you don't want to spread the colour across. So pretty straightforward. We can get in with our light colour now and just stain in here into our infill areas and into our upper fence areas here in the light colour. You don't have to worry about spilling over onto your dark colours, because it'll just absorb straight in, and it'll still look like a nice smooth transition from your light to your dark. So there's no need to really do any masking here when you're doing your second light stain, unlike when we did the first section here. So just a couple of points: make sure your paintbrush is not full of water, it's been cleaned, but also relatively dry when you start with your next coat. Otherwise you'll be thinned down when you just start your first area. So let's jump straight into it. Now, as you'll see here, I have intentionally left a small section of the fence here that's not yet been stained in the foreground, just so you can see a comparison with the raw timber unfinished fence with, in the background there, the finished fence product with the stain colour on it. And I think you'll agree it makes quite a difference in the appearance, having that nice stain colour as opposed to just a raw timber fence. Just before I do go on and show you the final finished results on the fence areas that we've been staining, I would ask that if you do find my videos useful, please do click and subscribe to my channel also. That really helps me out immensely. I'd really appreciate it. And maybe check out some of my other videos on various DIY household projects. Now, just before I do show you the final result up there on the fence, I would mention we have also done the same colour scheme on other areas around the home here as well, like on this open fence area. Now, one thing here we did is that we actually stained these individual battens while they were actually off this fence, because I did rebuild this fence and I put these battens in here, new battens closer than the original old battens that were here. So while the battens were off, I did the stain in the darker colours where we stained the light frame areas, and then we actually screwed these battens onto the fence after they're all already stained. And that way we didn't have to worry about having to try and mask off our dark and light areas of this fence area. Now, as for maintenance, in 2 or 3 years time, we can just stain over this entire fence area with a lighter colour, and you'll still retain that dark and light effect here also. So here you can see the final finished result here. This is in our pool area, and as you'll see, we've got a beautiful finish here with our really dark colour around the framing areas and our lighter stain area here in the insets on the retaining wall. And you'll notice also that I've done the same colour scheme on our fencing area here as well. And I think you'll agree it really does look a hell of a lot better than just having a one colour stain in the area. So once again, I would say this is really, it's not a difficult thing to do. It's not a lot of extra work to do 2 colours as opposed to 1. So I highly recommend giving it a try. I hope you guys have found this video useful, and you can maybe go away and attempt the same sort of project on your own property.